welcome to the Smart Workplace track for the Smart Building Conference. We're in a different room today, and it's proved a little tricky for some. And they're currently ringing a little bell that'll help attract the rest of the people in here. I also have to mention that we're better on content than we are on furniture, apparently, and the panel chairs will be here shortly. So if you see people coming in with chairs, this is part of the hotel logistics. But anyways, I'd like to welcome you to the Smart Workplace track and to share the thought that from our experience with the Smart Building Conference over the past years, it's become quite apparent that more and more the interest and the trends, to what does the occupant have to mean about all this smart building activity, and the fact that there's a wealth of technology here at the ISE show regarding the smart workplace. So on that basis, we decided to pull it out as a separate track. This is our first year doing this, but it looks like a very natural thing for us to do, and it looks like something that'll be very significant. I want to welcome here as our first speaker, Elisa Rönkä, who is the European lead for Smart Office at Siemens. She's braved a lot of weather to get here. It was actually very difficult for Germany compared to some other places to get here. I think our manager for the digital signage conference should be in tomorrow. He started from Munich, yes. Florian's having the trip from hell. But we're very pleased to have her open this first conference because of her experience in delivering talks like this across Europe, and to have the value of a company like Siemens and their perspective. Elisa is the Business Development Innovation Manager at Siemens Smart Infrastructure. She leads the European go-to-market strategy of human-centric workplace solutions like workplace experience platform, Comfy. With a diverse background in finance, design thinking, and development functions, Elisa aims to add value to all the stakeholders within the building lifecycle by promoting the emerging digital technologies. I can verify she's a frequent speaker because I see her on LinkedIn going, I think you were in Sweden last week, was it? Yeah. As a frequent speaker addressing the importance of smart buildings and their value to business and society, she passionately contributes to the digital transformation of the building industry. And I want to say this is absolutely what we need, is the passion, because in a lot of ways we are on a mission, and a mission to help the stakeholders in the smart building community understand what the occupants want, what the occupants need, and what benefit that will return back to the stakeholders. So Lisa, I'd like to welcome you up.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, good morning from my perspective as well. It was a long journey here from Zurich. You wouldn't believe how many hours you can spend on a train, but glad to be here. I hope you all had a great session yesterday and have had a big cup of coffee to stay awake for my presentation. So today the topic is about the future of workplace, or actually it should be probably the today of workplace, because in essence the development is so quick that we might as well speak about the trends that are here today, and we probably can't even address all of them at once, let alone the trends of tomorrow. So if we start with the first one, which is extreme flexibility. I think the flexibility topic has been around for quite some time. I think everyone here agrees and nods about, let's say, the agility in a workplace, activity-based working, having the right spaces for the right activity at the right time, all of this. And that's indeed correct, and that is what we need to work towards and then kind of address forward as well. But why I say extreme flexibility is that it's not only enough to, let's say, get the transparency, to see how spaces are used, to be able to, let's say, determine the status quo of how much each space is used at what certain time. You need that. You need to do that and verify that via data. And if you still have people walking around with clipboards doing this kind of analysis on the use of space, you might want to think of a different way of doing it. But nevertheless, that's one part, is to really get this kind of transparency on the utilization. But I always like to challenge the people I talk to and big enterprises on the then what. What do you do with this transparency? If you really want to gain an agile workplace and gain flexibility and utilize your spaces better, of course you need to know what your baseline is. But then the question starts that, okay, what do I do with this information? How do I actually start utilizing space better? That means driving behavior of the employees in a different way. And this becomes actually quite difficult subject to address, because changing human behavior, first of all, humans are resistant to change. No one wants to do anything differently, let alone they do not want to be directed by their employer to do things differently. So you all of a sudden have this situation of people not wanting to do things differently, however you know that you need to address it somehow. So really, in order to gain this kind of extreme flexibility, real agility in the workplace, you need to also have an end-user interface that kind of closes the loop between the transparency of the utilization and then actually directing people in a non-intrusive way to behave differently. Also, when we think about flexibility, there are certain limitations often that come from the physical building, from the infrastructure, and these need to also be taken into consideration. So if you are in the lucky situation of planning a building from scratch, do take into account that the infrastructure is also flexible. We often forget about this part and we only go to the digital, and if you just work on the digital layer, you might have some severe restrictions from the infrastructure. Here's an example of a Fortune 500 company floor plan that we have addressed. A huge corporation, a lot of free address seating, as you can see. And it's interesting because a lot of these corporations, the corporations such as Siemens, the big ones, often say that, oh, but we are agile. We have hot desking, so people can choose their seats freely. And that means we have implemented an agile culture. That could be correct, but then if you look at the utilization rate, in this case, desk utilization was 52%. 52%, that's not very efficient. That means there's a lot of inefficiency, a lot of waste going on in terms of the actual real agility. So if you talk about the real agility that you gain by this kind of extreme flexibility, it's about dynamically stacking people and spaces in a way that you actually have the right amount of space and you utilize that well. Now, dynamic stacking, I like to use that word. Some people might think it's a little bit negative to talk about stacking people, but in essence, it's to do it in a way that people don't feel like they are stacked, that you are just able to have people more densely in spaces without them feeling or having that, let's say, the personal feeling of too much density. Another interesting point is faster detection of workplace issues or the operational savings that can be addressed. So again, if we talk about extreme flexibility, this flexibility needs to flow into things like maintenance, like cleaning. The era of scheduling things is basically starting to be over. Think about the TV broadcasts. Used to be scheduled, then Netflix came and everything was disrupted. The same will happen in terms of maintenance and other scheduled let's say, operations. So if you want to have this extreme flexibility, it has to flow end to end throughout all your processes. So not only having hot desking, that is the prerequisite, that's the start. But if you claim to have an agile workplace and an agile workforce, you might want to go a little bit further than that. So that was the first trend, agility, extreme agility or extreme flexibility. The second trend I'd like to address is this personalization, and especially personalization on scale. Because first of all, we know that we are all individuals and we want to be treated as such. And I think, let's say, the further we go in these generations, the more and more this kind of snowflake culture comes to surface. So everyone wants to feel like an individual. They want to be treated like an individual. We talk about this a lot in terms of leadership, but we maybe forget to talk about it in terms of the workplace. So the actual spaces, the actual building, and the digital layer of your workplace experience. So in order to have this kind of personalization on scale, we have to get out of the mindset of one size misfits all, because it really, one size does misfit all. And I think we should more and more speak, now quoting the words of famous architect Carlo Ratti, to think of the building as a second skin of the individual. So it's really something that adapts according to your needs and it breathes with you. It's not a harness, it is something that adapts. And I like this metaphor because I think this really portrays how we should start experiencing this kind of personalization of the environment. Coming back to the point of apps when we speak about personalization. Apps are crucial nowadays in terms of workplace experience because that's the one way that you can easily personalize the digital experience. That is something where you can really cater for each and every employee in a way that brings value for them in their workday. So really the fluidity of experience through a workplace app is absolutely crucial. But not only that, we can also think about it from an infrastructure perspective. Here you see a typical situation how we address the environment in an office. So we have a set point. We have here a bandwidth of 1 degree where we have the absolute perfect temperature now for everyone to be most productive. And how we get this set point is usually from two sources. Either research based on aggregated data, knowing that based on research, this is the temperature where all people are most productive. Or then the other way is energy efficiency. So if this is a set temperature, then our building is extremely efficient. Both very valid arguments. But if we think about, again, the personalization factor and the fact that 90% of all the costs in an office building come from the people, not from the building and the efficiency of the building, then maybe we want to address this cost bucket called the people. And also these same people are the ones who generate the revenue or the competitive advantage or who create innovations in your organization. So you might want to address them also from the environment perspective. Now, this is how we usually do it because we believe that this is how the building management system demands it, that we can't tamper with the building management system. I'll let you in on a secret. Here's an actual example of how we've done it with Comfy, which means that here you see the feedback of the users' interactions on the app saying warm my space, are the triangles upward, or cool my space, triangles downwards. So in a certain space, relative to a certain time of the day, people are giving feedback. Now here's the first point and value that you as the employer or as the real estate professional get is feedback. Because usually I know what you get as feedback is someone calling when they're too hot or too cold and they're angry or something's not working. Here, every interaction on an app is feedback, and that's valuable because only with feedback can you actually develop your organization. That's the point number one. Point number two, here you can actually then see the BMS system adapting based on this feedback. So again, in a certain space, relative to the time of the day, this feedback from the app is fed back to the building management system. It learns, it adapts, and so these people don't have to give the same feedback every single day in the same space, but it is actually automatically adapting and adjusting. So we talk a lot about autonomous buildings, and as I said, you want this personalization, this feeling of the skin that breathes with you. This is the way to do that on scale. Not always easy from a technology perspective, especially if you have several buildings, several systems, a global workforce that you need to cater for. But in essence, these kind of solutions are the answer to create more and more of what I like to call a thermal bubble within a space. And if you don't believe that this should be done, because I hear a lot of, let's say, people challenging this fact and this idea that why should we do this? Isn't it better just to have the efficient building and everything set as a standard? Think about it from your own perspective. There might be a morning when you run to the bus and you need to, get your kids to daycare or whatnot, and you're absolutely sweating and hot. And there's another morning which is today, and you've waited for the bus that never came because of the storm, and you're absolutely freezing, and you come to work. It's two very different situations in the same space, same employer, same work day, but everything's different for you. So in order for you to do your best work and be as productive as possible, you need to let the environment adapt as well. So it's really this kind of I like to call it environment on demand. The world has become an on-demand world, and we need to also cater for that from the workplace perspective. We can't overlook it. Third big trend, privacy. I think everyone here has probably had to address this topic. It's interesting because very often I get asked, so what about GDPR? Are you compliant? Of course, we're compliant. Any vendor in their right mind would not be compliant to GDPR. Everyone has to have this compliancy in place. But that's usually not the issue. The much bigger issue is actually the privacy concern of the employees. So this feeling of intrusiveness. And that's completely different than any kind of regulation. That's actually a human feeling that is affecting their behavior and affecting their satisfaction, productivity, and everything that you want to gain with these kind of solutions. And we've really had to get into the weeds of this intrusiveness with workers' councils, for example. I can tell you, working in Germany with workers' councils, that's a whole different ballgame. So it's really the question of how can you gain this kind of trust from the employees to the technology that you are wanting to deploy. And it's never, the value of technology never comes from the technology itself. Really, you can dump a building and cram it full of all kinds of cool sensors and whatnot, but that holds absolutely no value unless you have the users using that technology, whoever the users are. And in this case, when we speak about workplace technology, it's usually the employees. So you have to think of it as a change management issue more than a technology issue. How can you address this? I heard one case from a customer where they had deployed sensors, and actually employees started ripping out the sensors because they had two concerns. One was the concern of being tracked. I think this is the normal concern that a lot of employees have. But some employees were also concerned about health issues, that if you have sensors, are they somehow radiating something that will cause health issues for them. And hence they ended up ripping out the sensors and basically playing football with them. Again, maybe not the best return on the investment there. So really think of it as a change management initiative. The one thing that we look into when it comes to the privacy concern is really this locating people. So tracking people, as you might want to call it. Locating colleagues is a great addition to agility. So it's about finding the spaces, as I talked in the beginning, but it's also about finding people, finding colleagues. And this is the number one use case that causes, first of all, problems with workers' councils and problems with individuals. Because somehow when it comes to the individual that you want to find in a workplace, they might feel that it's somehow stepping to their own privacy rights of not disclosing, for example, where they are. The way we address this is very simple. From a technology perspective, absolutely simple use case. Create a culture of openness where when you, as an individual, as an employee, want to be approached by others, when you are not, let's say, doing focus work, when you're okay for others to come and speak to you, you disclose your workplace for the day. That doesn't mean that you are in that place for the whole day, but you disclose your presence, as in, this is my seat for today, I'm not doing any focus work, come by, talk to me. This is creating more of a cultural aspect. So again, technology-wise, super simple. All you need to do is disclose your location, and you don't have to be in that location, right? You can just set it on a floor map. But from a cultural perspective, it's actually pivotal, because you are creating this kind of dialogue via a digital layer saying that, hey, please approach me. And if we think about it from an organizational perspective, everyone wants their employees to collaborate. We know that innovation comes from this kind of serendipity factor of people just bumping into each other and starting to collaborate. Innovation never happens in meeting rooms. Almost never, I have to say, but let's say almost never happens in meeting rooms. So you have to create a culture where it's okay to approach others and where you can find these others then quickly and easily. And this is where it has nothing to do with actually real-time tracking of your location. And as I said, technology-wise, super simple. No privacy concerns, no workers' council issues, yet you still get the same use case that you wanted. I think this locating people thing is where a lot of us go wrong because we start hyping about location technology. Location technology is very good. And of course, if the culture permits in your organization, why not have location tracking of individuals? That's no problem. But the problem is if your culture is not mature yet for this, and we've validated this with a lot of enterprises globally, a lot of the cultures, as the world stands today, are not yet ready for it. You might want to go for an easier option and then work your way towards location-based technology. So again, it's not about the technology, it's about the use case that you want to achieve. And hence, it's not about regulation in terms of privacy, it's really about the privacy concerns of the employees. Fourth topic I'd like to address, ROI. This is really the hot potato of the industry, I think. It's interesting how many business case calculations I have done with our customers and potential customers on how to justify workplace investments. Now, I think everyone in this room, because you came to this conference, are probably in agreement that the biggest value is really in the people. But at the same time, that's the hardest one to quantify. How on earth do you quantify the productivity increase of employees? There is no bulletproof way to connect the dots between productivity increase and revenue growth of an organization or profitability of an organization. Theoretically, there is research there. I have a bunch of research in my back pocket, happy to share all of that with you. But when you go with their Excel calculations to the budget holder, usually the question they have is, but show me. Like, show me, in how many years will this pay off, or how many months will this pay off? And it's virtually impossible to do that in an Excel when it's about productivity. The way we have tried to quantify it, but it's not bulletproof, it's still fuzzy and blurry and will remain so, is either by the perception of productivity. So as an individual, as a knowledge-based worker, if you perceive to be more productive, then at least the quantity or the quality or the level of innovation, collaboration, whatever, one dimension definitely has been better because you feel more accomplished. But again, how do you link that to revenue growth? Or we've measured it by time saved. So again, by being connected to spaces, people, services, finding things quicker, you can reduce certain amount of minutes per workday per employee, and that you can quantify as a productivity increase. But again, how do you connect the dots to the top line or the bottom line directly? There are KPIs we can hook onto, like employee churn, absenteeism, so forth. There are KPIs, but there is nothing that if you have, let's say, a non-believer on the topic sitting on the budget, none of these will actually make sense to them. What we often do is then go for the harder metrics, the ones that can be quantified, like space utilization, that you can quantify, the operational efficiencies, facility management improvement, that you can quantify. So there are ways to lure into this discussion with, let's say, the hard metrics. But again, the biggest value is in the productivity increase. That's why I think when we talk about ROI, we need to more and more also start thinking about the risk of inaction. What if I do not invest in any of these? If we think about the talent that all of us are so desperately seeking out there in the market, the digital natives, whatever you want to call them, really, I mean, they experience life through this, not even a digital lens, they breathe digital. It's very different. They don't even use the word digital. I always say that, we have to stop talking about digital. It will be outdated soon. The new generation does not see it that way. Which means that if we don't, from a workplace perspective, start catering for these individuals in a way that is natural for them and in a way that they even take for granted, we are lost in the game of talent. Talent attraction, talent retention. Two big topics on every CEO's mind, yet we somehow fail to link it to the workplace. Usually, yes, on the physical, less on the digital, for the reason that we can't quantify it. So really, when we think about ROI, yes, of course it's important to have some sort of idea on the return on investment. You can't just throw money out the window, fully understand that. But equally important, do the calculation of the risk of inaction. Show that Excel of what if we don't do this? What is the implication then? So we need to switch our mindset a little bit on the ROI. All right, last topic. So I've spoken a lot about the digital, a lot about the apps. The reason I speak about apps is because as the world stands today, apps are the way people experience the world. Let's see if that becomes wearables or whatever, voice control, whatever it will be in the future. But today, it's via an app. But equally important to this is also to look at the building differently. I come from the building industry, and I mean, shame on our industry for always looking at buildings as physical structures. It's always about this rigid frame that you can just optimize and squeeze, and it's more of this harness than the second skin. And of course, we need to still optimize. I mean, really, that's efficiency wasted if we don't. But we need to start looking at the whole concept of buildings differently. If we think about offices, highly paid knowledge workers, we can't treat the space in the building like a human warehouse. We really need to, let's say, give it a bigger role in contributing to the success that's being run inside the building. And this is what I mean when I say buildings as a platform. So yes, you have some physical limitations, some infrastructure limitations, but in essence, the building actually becomes an interface between the business that's run within and the people, and then the spaces and services that are done within. So very simply put, here's a picture. I can tell you it's not as easy to do that from a technology perspective. But in essence, you have data sources, lots of data sources. That keeps growing all the time. It's not only about the sensors and the IoT. Those are vital, usually in a lot of use cases. But it's also about the building. What kind of data can you achieve from that? What kind of data can you get out of the IT systems? And external sources. It could be weather, traffic, and whatnot. And not forgetting the most important sensor that you can have in an office building, the people. Again, every interaction that they do with the space or any kind of system is feedback. It's feedback on how they feel about the spaces. It's feedback on what they want to change. It's feedback on what they are looking for. Every interaction is a feedback. Treat it as such. It's really important. And you connect the different data sources in the context of the spaces. So again, you have to think about what is happening where and connect it with the people, with the services, and everything that is valuable for them. This can be done from a technology perspective. So the building becomes a platform from a technology perspective, but not only that, it becomes a platform in terms of innovation, in terms of collaboration, in terms of creating that revenue and that competitive advantage. And the building needs to be an active contributor in this space as well. So with that being said, it's all about connecting people to the spaces, to the services, to the different data sources, and make sure you have this kind of closed loop development in all of this. So you don't just go for one use case like the space utilization of space and the transparency of that, but you make sure that you have the then what. And you do it in a platform way that you can always do use cases on top of it. As the future of work or the society evolves, surely there will be new use cases that we can't even dream of that will be already a standard in 2 years. So you have to have a platform that you can keep building on top of. And then you can really start becoming the business partner from a building perspective as well. So thank you.
And perfect timing as well.
Oh, perfect. You never know about that one.
You have an inner clock that's working. So I think we have time for a few questions.
Sure.
And if you would have some questions, I will come over with the microphone, if you'd like. Right here. Yes, Rodo? Just identify yourself.
Hi, Rodolphe Dargison from Financics. More of a comment than a question. Thank you very much for your talk. Thank you for bringing up the always challenging question of return on investment. Very fair to do that. Though I think as an industry, we need to be less apologetic for the fact we can't quantify all of the benefits of a smarter workplace. I think the fact we can tie it to some hard metrics, which produce a very good business case on the space utilization, and then have a huge extra, slightly more fuzzy business case in terms of productivity benefits. In many cases, that's good enough. And if we compare to other functions, right? If we compare to marketing, as financial directors often say about marketing, well, I know half of the spend is wasted. I just don't know which half. And so in that sense, the smart workplace is already doing quite a lot better than that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think the difference is in, let's say, the stakeholders that we talk to. So the real estate industry is very known to look at the quantification and the hard metrics. And it's not normal in the real estate world to say that, the benefits will come, but I don't know from where. Like it's not the mindset. And it has to be a mindset shift of the entire, let's say, food chain. Of the real estate people. So I think that's one reason why we have harder discussions on the real estate side on this topic than, for example, in marketing or other HR employee facing things. So I think it's really just a mindset shift that we need to look at differently. And you're true. I mean, what you said is true. It's good enough to have the hard metrics and have that justification and then the upside potential. But I really think that in order to really start believing and having that kind of continuous value creation for the workplace, we need to also get out of that mindset of having to desperately quantify. So I think, yes, in essence, I mean, luckily we have the hard metrics that we can have in order to actually get the outcome that we want, but it would be great to maybe have a different level of discussion. And I think the industry is changing there, to be honest. It's getting easier and easier with these discussions. Thank you.
Other questions and points? Anyone would like to ask a question? Point? Just, one question from my side, Elisa. And, you guys are very advanced in this on the comfy side and that. And what would you say, because there's a lot of activity trying to put out similar apps, and in some cases we've been app to death, and in other cases, people think they get an app and they solve all their problems. What would you say is the formula for success, if I might say that, for Comfy at this point?
Yeah, so any app is not the formula, the only, let's say, golden nugget for success. Because as I said, even with apps, technology in itself holds no value. So the value comes from the customer adoption or user adoption, in this case, the employees. So it's really about change management. It's not about the technology. Now then, how can you ensure that the technology proves that value and you ensure that adoption is really to look at it from a cultural perspective. Of course, you need to know that the technology fits and everything's connected, everything works and the data flows, but that is usually not the problem in these solutions, really. The problem is in how do you ensure that in the context of that business, so the strategic KPIs of that business, in the context of that culture, how do you make this work? And it becomes a whole different discussion. So I think that's really the key in success of any kind of technology deployment. And then I completely agree with you that we have this kind of overflow of apps and there's even that saying, there's an app for that, and it becomes like a joke. We need to start converging all these different apps and different use cases in one platform. So it's from the end user perspective, it's one interface, one thing that works, one thing that's really fluid, so they actually want to use it. They're not forced to use it, they want to use it, it brings value, and you keep building on that platform. So converging the different apps and different maybe investments that have already been made in the past into one platform. And I think that's really another key for success and driving this adoption.
It's not as simple as it looks when
it's
you see
not
the
always
little
as
app.
simple.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.